Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. What a day today was. Big hearing, and I'll tell you, I got to give credit to Liz Cheney. I'm giving credit to Liz Cheney on these hearings. I'm giving her the credit because they have been compelling, they have been on message, they have been directed, they have been focused, and they've been, well done. And the suspense levels, the grab you in kind of things. Yeah, this is Republican messaging. She gets it. I'm going there. She gets it. Because I don't know that today, I don't know why today was such a special bit of information that it had to happen in this breaking kind of fashion. There's part of me that goes, I think this may have been, I don't know, planned out to kind of generate some buzz, to grab some attention, but in a good way, because wow. Did I say wow? Wow. Bombshells, and lots of them. Was looking at the headlines of a couple of newspapers. New York Times, Trump sought to join January 6th mob, enraged. He lunged for the limo wheel. USA Today, Trump lunged at security chief on January 6th. Politico, former White House aide, delivers shocking testimony about out-of-control Trump on January 6th. Los Angeles Times, Trump flew into rage on January 6th and lunged at Secret Service agent. Washington Post, Trump wanted crowd to march to Capitol despite weapons. Oh yeah, there was lots of that. Lots and lots. Now here's the thing. Everything that I've warned about over the years, everything I've talked about over the years with the Trump administration and the Donald himself was laid out right in the open on the table during Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. She a true MAGA world believer. Understand, this was, she not only drank the Kool-Aid, she was one of the people who absorbing it intravenously. This is one of those folks that they were all in. And to have her come forward in this moment and go, no, this was wrong. This is a true believer realizing the cause wasn't what she was led to believe it was supposed to be. She thought she was fighting to change America, fight for make America great again. That's what she bought, because she bought the T-shirt. She got the hat. I'm sure she had the flag. I'm sure she had the underwear. I'm sure she had it all. And this is one of those moments where, as someone who was one of the true believing crowd, one of the flag waving, one of the people in the pews, chanting, one of the cult, who's come out and said, this is reality. This is what I saw. This is what happened. This is all of the unvarnished horrible. I wonder, is this the moment for MAGA world to go, yeah, it's okay now. Maybe we can stop defending reflexively just how horrible Trump is. Because look, all over the last 4 or 5 years, since 2016, 2015, really, I've been saying this guy's horrible. Greedy, self-centered, fascistic, petulant, childish, chaotic, reckless, megalomaniac, egotistical, abusive, cowardly. Go on, anti-American. Reality is, I ran out of adjectives of just how bad this guy was going to be, and it was laid out on the table today in a hearing of a true believer. These weren't my words. These weren't, some hippie leftists. This certainly was not Antifa. That was not what we saw today. This was a true believer. And the story that she laid out was one of Donald Trump willing to throw the entire history of this country away, and not just Trump. And this is the part that I'm struggling with, and I've struggled with for a very long time. Look, I know most of the operatives in the political world, when you get up to that level, are soulless. I know most of the people that were, lobbyists and work in DC are completely and totally soulless. They view everything that happens in the frame of it's a game, but it's also a game that has guardrails, that there's only so far you're willing to go. And I think you saw that in the lawyers, Cipollone and Hirschman and some of the others who were saying, no, these are the bounds of how crazy and how out of control we're willing to get. But the rest of them, the people who and the way she laid out how her boss, just kind of, it's going to get bad. I find it fascinating that none of the people around him were willing to do the right thing in the moment. Now you're going, hey, there's some people, Mike Pence, hero now, even this Cassidy Hutchinson, right now doing the right thing. Where were these people then? Now understand, MAGA world, full bore. And I guarantee you she is getting death threats as we speak. I guarantee the full weight and anger of MAGA world on her, especially since Trump has done what Trump does and began to attack her. Who knew? Nobody knew her. His statement was, I hardly knew this person, Cassidy Hutchinson. Is other than I heard very negative things about her. Heard very negative things. Total phony, a leaker. And when she requested to go with certain others on the team to Florida after having served on my full term in office, I personally turned down her request. He goes on to say, why did she want to go with us if she felt so terrible? I understand that she was very upset, very angry that I didn't want her to go or to be a member of a team. She's bad news. Bad news. This is what he put on. So this is what he does. I barely knew her, but the pictures, and this is where the committee did a very good job putting up the pictures of, hey, there's the Orange Menace, there he is right there, and oh, there she is over there, and there he is again, and there she is, and there he is, and there she is. Barely knew her, huh? Now, my mindset goes into this world. She's a young woman. Easy for him to dismiss her. So maybe he thought she was just the help. I don't know. But interesting that this would be the defense. And it is the MO, is it not? This is what Trump does. Anyone who is disloyal or tells the truth, they get attacked. Also, what I found interesting is, as the hearing wrapped up, you had Liz Cheney come out and say, look, a lot of the witnesses are getting, what you knew. You know that Trump views himself as kind of a mafia don, as kind of the head of the family, kind of the Vito Corleone character. So is it surprising that witnesses are getting the phone calls or the messages of, hey, it's a mighty nice career you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. It's nice, it's a nice thing you got there. And as long as you do the right thing, as long as you stay where you're supposed to, as long as you don't open your mouth, you're going to be fine. You'll be fine with MAGA world. Now you step out of line, we're going to sig the crazies on you. And I got to imagine she's taking her beatings right now figuratively. Now, this is again, I look at that administration and there's so many scandals that would take down any other presidency, but it's almost, like I said, it's almost a cult where I know people who, even in the face of this woman who is truly drank the Kool-Aid, who has come forward and said, these are all the horrible things that happened, they're still never going to believe it. Never. Because they're vested in it. And I'm not sure how that happens. I have never been that vested in any politician, ever. ever. If this were any president, I would be first in line to say lock them up, because this was truly criminal. Truly. Now, one of the things we found out, and this is one of those questions that I go back to January 6th. We came on the air here that night, and I said, you know what I don't understand is how is it that the people in the crowd were able to have flagpoles that were metal with the eagles on that they used as weapons, as spears? How are they able to have all of these things that they had? We found out from her testimony that a bunch of people didn't go through the metal detectors to get into the area around where Trump was, which explains why that wasn't full. Because they had the checkpoint set up with the magnetometers that you had to go through the metal detectors. And people were, no, we're not going to go through that. We'll stand just outside because we know ultimately we're marching to the Capitol and we need to have our weaponry, in which we now know, they had bear spray and they had knives and they had AR-15s and people were packing heat. In fact, they played some audio from Capitol Police pointing out, hey, that guy's got an AR-15. Hey, that person's got a gun. Hey, that person's got a weapon. They actually were picking people out of the crowd who were armed. So much for, oh no, it was just like any other day. It was just a lobbying day. It was a good American patriotic day. They were between the velvet ropes. Granted, they were defecating on the floor and urinating on desks and breaking windows and all that stuff and stabbing policemen with flagpoles, but any other day. I mean, and then you find out that Trump was like, hey, I don't care that they had weapons. I don't care that they're armed. I don't care because they're not coming for me. They're my people. They're not here for me, so I don't care. Get rid of the metal detectors. And you go, but what about the Capitol Police? What about the people in the Capitol? And if you're a Republican legislator, this is the part where I have mentally played this game out. I don't care what letter you have behind your name. If somebody in that crowd grabbed somebody with a congressional pin, if they would have kicked in a door and found a congressman in their office or a congresswoman in their office, I have no doubt they would have ripped them limb from limb. Republican or Democrat or independent, it didn't matter. That crowd was out for blood. And he riled them up. And she talked about how the legal counsel office was saying, hey, don't say these things. Don't rile these people. Don't do this. Don't do what you did. Don't put this stuff in the speech. They did it anyway. They did it on purpose. I also found it interesting that, again, my congressman's name, Scott Perry, was brought up as someone full right in the middle of all of this stuff. Found it interesting that General Flynn's name was brought up and him pleading the fifth. Again, I love how Trump said, anybody who pleads the fifth, they must be guilty, except all the people around him who have been doing nothing but pleading the fifth. There's so much here. And it's going to get more. It's going to get worse. It's going to get bigger. I believe that the next step is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the question is Merrick Garland watching this? I think that's what's on everyone's mind. Because I'll tell you, as today was going on, my mind was, hey, when's someone going to call for an indictment? When they were talking about, hey, there are people strong-arming witnesses, my mind goes, this is probably Giuliani. They're going to say, hey, Giuliani should be indicted. So I'm curious what your thoughts. Did you watch? Did you see the big hearing? 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425 if you want to weigh in. Got a thought, question, comment. Does it matter? Does it matter at this point? Or is this just every time they hit that gavel, it gets worse and it gets worse, and the picture gets clearer and clearer that they absolutely wanted to overthrow our democracy. They absolutely wanted to overthrow our elections and hold on to power at any cost. 1-866-416-RICK. Back after this. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we found out that Trump attacked a Secret Service agent. And look, I'm waiting for the right wing to go, the Secret Service held the president hostage. They wouldn't let him go to the Capitol. He wanted to go. He wanted to be there with his people and lead the charge. I'm waiting for the MAGA heads to do that. See, they stopped destiny. They stopped our destiny. Our fearless leader was going to lead us into the Capitol and hang Nancy Pelosi. I'm waiting for the crazy right wing to say that. But I'm a little surprised that he did attack a Secret Service agent. But again, like a petulant child in a cereal aisle whose mother told him, no, you can't have the Cocoa Pebbles. He done doth lost his mind. Anyway, let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are we doing today?
Oh, we're doing. Yeah, we watched the hearing, of course, and I'm thinking the whole time, so tell me something I do not know. You know, when she's explaining, all about the explosive temper and, the whole shenanigans. And I'm thinking, anybody with a brain that has paid attention to this man over the past 40 years knows that, he is nothing more than a freaking spoiled child. He is a sociopath. And y'all surprised?
No.
It's just
not even a little bit.
amazing.
Not even a little bit surprised that he would throw dishes against the wall or rip the tablecloth off tables and make the staff clean up the mess. Am I surprised that he abuses workers at every turn? No, not even a little bit.
Well, absolutely not. I mean, I remember when he was married to Ivana and how he treated her. And it's like, these people were just like, it's all fake news. Well, I know that y'all lie about Hillary, and you've lied about Hillary for 40 years, but this is a lot of people, long before he was involved in politics, that have talked about it. It's just amazing. And I'm like you, I'm waiting for the right wing to claim, oh my, they held him hostage. But yeah. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Do you think any indictments come out of this? Do you think eventually he's held accountable, or is this all just performative?
I'm going to tell you what. I think that should they decide to hold him accountable, that somehow or the other it will end up in front of the Supreme Court, and the whack job bunch of the conservatives are all going to be going that, he had the right to do it because Jesus anointed him, or some stupid thing. I mean, seriously.
Yeah,
think about it.
All right, Alice. Thank you for that.
I got a laugh out of it. Have a good evening.
Thank you. But here's the thing, and this is where one of those moments where you go, our institutions held barely. We've held on for now, barely. And this was the conversation I had with my daughter, because we were in the car watching. We were watching this as we were driving, And I was listening, she was watching. And, this is one of those moments where, as it was going on, we're having this conversation going, this is something that you're probably going to be telling your grandchildren about. This is that kind of historical moment. Because at one point she turned to me and she goes, did the president really want the vice president to be hung? Is that what she just said? And I said, yeah, that's what she just said. So you may want to remember that because, generations down the road are going to remember this is going to be the history that is taught in 100 years. Yeah, there was a president. It was a long time. It was an orange guy, petulant, used to throw dishes against the walls, used to do all kinds of weird stuff, temper tantrums, all kinds of stuff. And yeah, he wanted to hang his vice president. Yeah, that's going to be like a Trivial Pursuit question in 100 years. If, and this is the big if, and this is what I told her, this is the big if, because we are at a crossroads. Do we head down the authoritarian, fascistic kind of road that someone like Trump, that someone like Josh Hawley, that someone in Pennsylvania like Benito Mastriano would take us down, where you have a theocratic corporate governance? Or do we continue down the path of liberal democracy? We're at a moment and this is what conservatives understand. They understand the gravity of this moment. They're seeing this much the way the New Deal 90 years ago. In 32 when FDR won and you had a massive movement towards more social programs, more worker-centric stuff, more working class-centric policy. They hated that. They hated Social Security. They hated unemployment insurance. They hated maximum hour laws. They hated minimum wage laws. They hated unionization rights. They hated all of it. Hated it. And have been fighting against it all of these years. And we are now at a moment where they're about to kill off the New Deal. They're about to kill off the 20th century and take us back to the good old days of the 19th. This is where working people, women, minorities, this is where all of the folks on the left had better put down their divisions, put down their cause head mentality, and join together and understand what the real fight is. The real fight is saving our democracy. Because the theocrats are coming, and I just saw this clip of Lauren Boebert, and this is what happens when you have the dumbest person in the class representing you in Congress. She was giving a spiel at some religious group thing, and she says, I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk. That's not in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter, and it means nothing like what they say it does. She believes that the church directs government. The church tells government what to do. That the religious folk, tells everybody else what they have to do. This is what she believes. Now, again, the stinking letter that she didn't read doesn't matter to her because she's a believer. And I'm telling you, these people are dangerous because they're not smart enough to realize the path that they're taking all of us down. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program podcast, make sure you get that. We'll take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1940. That was the day President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Smith Act. Some initially dubbed it the Harry Bridges Law after the radical labor leader, long targeted by the FBI for deportation. Politicians claimed it was designed to prosecute fascists, Nazis, and communists. In fact, the Smith Act was first used to prosecute and convict Minneapolis Teamster leaders and supporters of the Socialist Workers' Party recognized for their successful 1934 strike and radical leadership. Named after the Virginia Democratic Representative Howard W. Smith, it was originally titled titled the Alien Registration Act of 1940. In addition to mandating the registration and fingerprinting of resident aliens, it allowed for the deportation of those resident aliens who sought to overthrow the government by force. But the act also extended to those citizens who advocated the overthrow of the government by force or violence, or engaged in the printing, publishing, or distributing of materials that advocated sedition. And it made it illegal for citizens to organize or belong to any association that engaged in such activity. According to historian Donna Haverty Stack, author of Trotskyists on Trial, Free Speech and Political Persecution Since the Age of FDR, the Smith Act was a peacetime anti-sedition law that marked a dramatic shift in the legal definition of free speech protection in America. The Minneapolis case shows how far the administration went to prosecute political dissent, even to the point of targeting the labor liberal left. The Smith Act served as a prime tool for the McCarthyite Red Scare, and it was used to prosecute more than 100 communists and labor leaders. Finally, in a landmark 1957 Supreme Court case, Yates v. United States, convictions under the Smith Act were rendered unconstitutional.
Too many big business CEOs turn out to be grifters, ripping off consumers, workers, and others. But the corporate con artists I consider most vile are those who profiteer on people's health care needs. We've had such infamous high-profile scammers as Medicare fraudster Rick Scott, Big Pharma price gouger Martin Shkreli, and the Sackler family of opioid pushers. Worse, though, we now face an industry-wide epidemic of insurers, hospitals, and others that are pushing higher costs onto patients, then systematically pushing those who can't pay the full inflated tab into debt schemes. With bloated interest charges, payments go on for years, and medical bankruptcies are soaring. The most significant statistic in today's avaricious world of healthcare finance is this: half of U.S. adults don't have the money to cover a $500 medical bill. Thus, as the system keeps jacking up its prices and profits, millions of families are forced by illness or injury into the dark valley of debt, inhabited by ruthless debt collectors employed by the medical establishment. But wait, you say, I have health insurance. Still, ever-increasing prices and out-of-pocket insurance requirements put you into debt too. A recent Kaiser Family Foundation survey found that 6 out of 10 working-class adults with health coverage went into medical debt in the past 5 years. Most perversely, healthcare debt prevents many people from getting health care. 1 in 7 Americans say the corporate system has refused care to them because they have unpaid medical bills, and 2/3 say they've put off care because of the fear of crushing debt. As one expert puts it, the number one reason and the number 2 and 3 and 4 reasons that people go into medical debt is that they don't have the money. It's not complicated. This is Jim Hightower saying, to help stop healthcare industry's profiteers, go to ripmedicaldebt.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, big explosive day of testimony with the January 6th Commission, and if you didn't see it, you gotta spend the time and put the time in and watch this. Put down the mind-numbing TV and watch it. It was riveting throughout it kept my 13-year-old daughter's interest. That kind of important. Just so many questions to come forth with this, and here to share some thoughts on the big hearing and all of that, I've asked our good friend Trygve Olsen to come talk with us. Trygve is the principal over at Viking Strategies, also a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. Trygve, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's great to be back. I always enjoy talking.
So let's jump into the big hearing. Were you surprised that this breaking hearing happened? Do you think this really was a breaking hearing? Do you think it was planned? Give me your thoughts.
Well, I will tell you, I watched it, and it was riveting on many levels. And I took a little grief on Twitter because I suggested that she was brave and a hero, and there were some people giving blowback on that. But, she's 25 years old and at the center of literally every newspaper and television station, not only across the United States, but around the world, describing what transpired and what she knew. And, flat out crazy that she demonstrated so much bravery, and some of these people who far more experienced, far older individuals, cowered, have been cowering in fear and appeasing. That's the part that struck me as stunning. And you mentioned about your 13-year-old daughter. I have a 13-year-old daughter too. I hope I raise my daughter to be her. So yeah, I mean, impressive and shocking. Not that maybe we're surprised that she was showing what Donald Trump was trying to do, but I don't know how you describe that as anything other than sedition by these people.
No, and this is where I said, look, in this moment she's courageous. You give her the credit for it, but at the moment when all this stuff is going on, I hesitate to throw the hero word around, especially when you're talking about someone like Mike Pence. And others, look, you had opportunities all along the road to set this straight, to not allow it to get this far down the road. And none of these people, none of them did a damn thing to stand up and do what's right. Now, look, I know DC is mostly soulless, and I know most of these people are soulless and they think it's just a game. But at some point, you got to look at a scenario and go, we're going off the cliff in a fiery dumpster.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mike Pence, Cephalo, a lot of these other people who, they're middle-aged people, and they have sat quiet. I don't think anyone could describe them as heroic.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, when you reach a certain age, you should know better. I think the fact that it took somebody who's 25 to be the one who stood up and said, I'm not going to be afraid to go and speak. That it's impressive, no doubt. I think the reality is, and I talk about this a lot on Twitter and to audiences, it's these people who appease, who enable. It's part of the reason why I decided to join the Lincoln Project. I did not know how I would be able to look my daughters in the eye when Trump came on the scene, if I didn't try and push back against that. And these people who've appeased, who've enabled, I mean, somebody like Kevin McCarthy, what weak, soulless individuals. And I just wonder how someday when they're asked by their kids, did you do the right thing? They're ever going to be able to look them in the eye. I just don't, it was stunning. I don't think anybody's probably surprised about, Trump and throwing China around and grabbing Secret Service. It's just who the guy is. But the fact that all these people went along with him and have continued to, cower in silence, it's tragic, and they need to be held accountable.
Yeah, it turns out the very best people are cowards. That's what it turns out.
Yeah, and I think about those people take an oath when they take those jobs, and the oath is to the United States and the Constitution, and the idea that that it took somebody who, I remember being 25. I thought I was pretty old when I was 25, but you're really still a child or a young person to speak out that clearly. I thought the committee, Benny Thompson, Liz Cheney, all those people on the committee, again, they are showing the best of what America is supposed to be about, which is average Americans standing up, just like Eugene Goodman at the Capitol, steering that mob away. But that what we learned today about how Donald Trump saw that mob, he saw them as basically an army to undermine the election and the American system of democracy.
Yep. No, and he didn't care what they did or what they had or what they were going to do, because he believed they weren't there for him. So he didn't care about anybody else. And again, that plays into who he's always been. It's all about
Yes.
it's always all about him. Now I know you're in Wisconsin and there's a senatorial race going on there.
Mhm.
Ron Johnson's eyeball deep in all of this because there were fake electors. I guess the slates came to him somehow to pass on to Pence. He didn't know about them. Then he did know about them. Then he drug Congressman Kelly into it. And where are things now? How deep have the lies gotten with Ron Johnson at this point?
Well, I mean, I think that the lies have gotten deep with Ron Johnson. What's happening now is some truths are coming out, and he can't continue to talk and explain them away. I will say, Ron Johnson has lived a little bit of a charmed political life because every year that he's been on the ballot have been Republican years and in Wisconsin, and he has benefited from being able to say one thing to the base of the Republican Party and something different in his advertising to suburban women in places like Waukesha County, where he tries to be sort of seen as more moderate. And because it's been Republican years, he's gotten through. The assumption, and the only thing that maybe is keeping Ron Johnson afloat right now, and there was just a poll that came out from Marquette University, gold standard of Wisconsin polls, that showed Johnson losing by a couple points to all the Democrat candidates except for one and to a generic Democrat. None of them were over 50%. But Ron Johnson was being held up by the fact that Republicans are much more enthusiastic about voting than Democrats. And the reality is Democrats in Wisconsin, independents in Wisconsin, who universally in the case of Democrats and the majority of independents who loathe Ron Johnson, they have to get out and show up and vote. And if they do, Ron Johnson will be gone.
Yeah, how is it possible Democrats are not enthused and ready to vote this November? How is that possible, given everything we've seen in these hearings, given the fact that the Supreme Court just overturned Roe, that they've come out with some really horrible decisions? How is it possible that people aren't just chomping at the bit, ready to hold this cowardice Republican Party accountable? How is that possible, Trigby?
It's hard for me to understand. I do think there's been some indications of late that between the 1-6 hearings and certainly, it's pretty early with Roe, but you had the leak, that Democrats are starting to energize more. But I also think that, there's been a part of the Democrat coalition that they're fighting amongst themselves some rather than focusing on what the real enemy sometimes is. Now there's been examples where that isn't the case, but even in terms of primary turnout, we're seeing that Republican turnout is a lot greater than Democrat turnout, and we'll see if that continues post Roe. But certainly in a state like Wisconsin, I can't imagine that there wouldn't be more energy on the Democrat side, given you have Ron Johnson there, and then you have a bunch of Republican candidates for governor against Evers, not the most exciting guy, but a good guy, a high school teacher, originally, and all those candidates are denying the result in 2020. So if that doesn't get Wisconsin Democrats revved up, I don't know quite what will. Hopefully they will.
Yeah, it's crazy. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Trigby Olson, principal at Viking Strategy, also a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. You want to check out the work that they do, projectlincoln.org, the website. We'll get links out on the website, how you can check out the work they do there. I'm looking at this moment, and we talked about this a moment off air. I'm looking at this potentially, and this is the conversation my 13-year-old daughter and I had today, that, we're at kind of, I think, like a 1932 moment where the direction of this country for the next, 90 years could be being set right now. And if we don't make good decisions, if we don't fight, if people don't get out and vote, if you inculcate a bunch of the crazy right-wing zealotry into law, it's going to be decades before you undo the damage. I'm curious if you see this moment kind of in the same frame.
Oh, no doubt. no doubt. I mean, between now, I say this all the time, you know, the day we have to all be thinking about is January 20th, 2025, the day we have to inaugurate a new president. And everything between now and then um, that matters has to be the focus. And so when you think about, um, you know, when you think about the changes that are being pushed, if you're really angry about that, then that starts with, you know, governor's races in Pennsylvania, where you have Josh Shapiro running against Doug Mastriano, who basically wants to eliminate choice, any choice in the state of Pennsylvania, and has said that he doesn't really care how Pennsylvania votes in a presidential election. Then you go to Michigan. You got Gretchen Whitmer running for governor against a guy, the front runner on the Republican side, became the front runner when he got arrested by the FBI for being part of 1-6. Again, one who wants to eliminate all choice in Michigan in terms of women's reproductive rights and simultaneously denies the election. And then you go to Wisconsin, where you have not only the same dynamic at play between the two leading candidates, but both of them are now starting to go after, you know, same-sex marriage and that decision. So, you know, at this point, it isn't about policy differences that any of us may have. You and I may have some differences on policy, Rick, but we're in the same place that democracy, we are at an essential tipping point for democracy, and we're not going to be out of it after 2022 either, after that election. We have to just make sure we get through this election protecting those guardrails of democracy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And this is the, you know, and this is the thing that bothers me. While we're so divided here at home, globally the world is going in ways of chaos, and the more divided we are here, the less able we are to act. And I know a lot of people don't think we should be involved in international affairs or be the world's policeman, but somebody's got to be the leader of the world. Someone's got to direct things, and I would rather it be us than the Chinese or the Russians. So while we're you know, for 4 years we did nothing, and the Chinese filled that void, and now you've got this very dangerous and a very uncertain world. And here at home, we're not doing ourselves or the globe any favors either.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Rick, and maybe some of your listeners don't, I spent a lot of time in that world working with people from the Democrat side and the Republican side, working together in a lot of these countries, including Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, with people who are fighting against people like Putin and Lukashenko and for democracy in places like Ukraine. And it was bipartisan, both sides. In fact, my organization was led by John McCain, and the Democrats, who I work closely with, is led by Madeleine Albright. I will tell you, the thing about Vladimir Putin, if you saw the video of the shopping mall being hit by the cruise missile, and if you think about for a minute that if he could, he would be hitting the shopping mall in your country, in your hometown, with a cruise missile if you don't do what he wants. And so the leadership Joe Biden has shown throughout this, and the unification, how sometimes he's led from in front, sometimes he's let our allies lead, that's really leadership. And you saw it today with huge breaking news this evening that Turkey has lifted their veto of Finland and Sweden joining the alliance, and that's a real game changer. I mean, Sweden's been neutral forever, right? And the Finns, they're tough as nails. But there again, that's what happens when you have leadership. What happens when you have Donald Trump and not serious, and nothing could be less serious than electing Donald Trump president of the United States. When you have political instability in the United States, you get global instability.
Yeah, but but the argument, Trigvi, is, well, you know, Putin didn't invade Ukraine when Donald Trump was strong and in leadership position. You know, he didn't dare on Trump's watch.
Yeah, I mean, but in reality, he didn't during Trump's watch because he was getting everything he wanted during Trump's watch. And quite frankly, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting in the 1-6 committee is the documentary filmmaker, and some of the stuff that's come out that he didn't get to film Trump because Trump was apparently having some call from Air Force One right before January 6th with Putin. I just think Donald Trump's transactional, and he wouldn't have any problem thinking, all right, well, I'll just sell off a piece of Europe for whatever I'm going to get from Putin. So this idea that it didn't happen on Trump's watch, it's choices and actions have consequences that are sometimes not seen immediately, and that's what we're seeing here. There was no check, at least not as much as there needed to be, on Putin during the Trump years, and now we're having the residual consequences.
Yeah, and not good at all.
No.
All bad stuff. But Trigby, I appreciate the thoughts and the comments. Good luck. I know you've got family traveling to that region of the world. I wish them the best.
Thank you.
And I'm hoping that something in that region of the world breaks.
Well, I'll tell you, Rick, the first thing that we can do in terms of helping that part of the world is staying strong with NATO, and the other piece is we can get our own house in order. And that's what we have to think about every day between now and election day, not just this one, but in 2024 as well.
Amen. Trigby, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And he's right, spot on, accurate. Get our house in order. That is the number one thing we need to be doing. And that means make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you're committed to voting. Make sure you're ready to vote and get excited. We need to hold people accountable. I'll take a quick break. When we come back, lots to get to. Remember, if you miss any of the program, download the podcast. Never miss a moment. Always there, always available. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day that the U.S. Congress passed the Walsh-Healy Public Contracts Act. The bill had been proposed by the Secretary of Labor, Francis Perkins. The act was part of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal effort to combat the ravages of the Great Depression. The year before, the President and Secretary Perkins had faced a major setback in their New Deal policies. The Supreme Court had declared the National Industrial Recovery Act, part of the Recovery Plan, unconstitutional. The President and his team went back to the drawing board to develop new strategies. Secretary Perkins told the president, quote, "I've got 2 bills locked in the lower left-hand drawer of my desk against an emergency." One of those bills became Walsh-Healy. The act declared that any manufacturer with a contract of more than $10,000 with the U.S. government for goods or supplies had to abide by certain rules. They had to pay the prevailing minimum wage. They had to allow their employees to work an 8-hour workday and a 40-hour work week. They could not hire boys under the age of 16 or girls under the age of 18. Companies could not use prison labor, and the companies had to provide a safe and healthy workplace. This New Deal Act stood up under the scrutiny of the courts. Even more importantly, the act was a precursor to the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Fair Labor Standards Act was passed the next year, providing many of these same provisions to the general workforce. The Walsh-Healy Act remains in effect today, protecting workers who are employed by companies that manufacture goods for the U.S. government. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So here's an interesting little bit. Howard Stern says he's considering running for president himself. Look, I like Howard Stern. I always loved listening to the program. But he said, I'm actually going to probably have to run for president now. I said, this Trump legacy, hope he's happy, back alley abortions, he's deranged, these justices are deranged, evidently. And I agree. These are bad times, and we're in a moment. And this is where, like I said, I had this conversation with my daughter as we were driving. that, we're at a crossroads. What kind of a country do we want to be? What is the future? And, I got a bunch of people going, well, this, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This has been happening. They've been coming after workers' rights, women's rights, consumers' rights. They've been coming after the working class of this country for 50 years. This is not new. They've been telling us this is what they want to do. This is what the Republican agenda has been all about. This is what the whole neoliberal agenda was about. So your corporate Democrats are just as guilty of this as well. So are we surprised that this is happening? No. The moneyed interest of this country, this is what they want. They want their power back. The oligarchs want their control back. They want their status back. They want their power. They want their money. They want their wealth. And they want to be able to flaunt it. And what they certainly do not want is you and me, the unwashed masses, the rabble, having the ability to vote, having the ability to demand that they pay their fair share of tax revenue. They're forcing them to do what past generations have done. Share. I always find it interesting that working class people will vote for tax policies that will enrich the billionaire class while punishing them. Now, I know we're all embarrassed millionaires and we all think someday I'm going to be Jeff Bezos. Someday I'm going to be tinkering in my garage and I'm going to figure out how to turn water into wine or gasoline or whatever. And I'm okay with that. Please figure that out, however that works. But not at the exclusion of sanity of other policies. And I spent a lot of time thinking of my grandparents' generation, who, when they came back from fighting fascism overseas, they came home and they fought it here. They fought a corporatocracy. They fought a theocracy. They fought all of the things that right now they want to return. Extremist religion, extremist corporatism. That's what's inculcated in our Supreme Court right now. This is what they're doing. And they're doing it because, well, we're divided. Because it's so easy to divide people. It's so easy to tear people apart. As my grandfather always said, any idiot with a hammer can tear down a house. It takes a skilled craftsman to build one. Same thing with democracy. Any idiot can tear it apart. Look, we just had one for 4 years. And look at the damage in 4 years. One moron, one idiot, one self-centered, egotistical. Look at what one guy was able to do in 4 years. Imagine someone smarter. Imagine someone with an actual agenda who actually cared about the trains running on time and cared about, making sure that the masses were quelled and cared for in a way that, well, they're not going to rise up. They're not going to get angry. They're not going to fight back because, hey, the trains are running on time. Hey, I've got a decent job. Hey, the kids got good schools. Hey, the roads are paved. Hey, everything's okay. I get my bread and circus. I get steady diet of whatever I need. There's always something on the idiot box to pay attention to. That's what's concerning to me, because you're going to see this flip. You're going to see the Republicans in a quick way. They're going to flip. They're going to be all about the social safety net. They're going to be all about how do we help those poor mothers with their children? How do we use tax dollars to fund, privatized faith-based initiatives so that we can have a private social safety net? You watch. It's coming. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Scary times.
There were multiple errors, miscalculations, and just a total lack of resources by the U.S. Forest Service.
New Mexico's largest ever wildfire caused by a prescribed burn. Japan's electric grid strains under historic extreme heat wave. Plus,
about 3/4 of U.S. adults have experienced extreme weather in the last 5 years.
And for many of them, extreme weather events are disastrous for long-term finances.
All of those disasters and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. weeknight.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I made the point that Jeff Clark is not even competent to serve as the Attorney General. He's never been a criminal attorney. He's never conducted a criminal investigation in his life. And he kind of retorted by saying, well, I've done a lot of very complicated appeals and environmental litigation. And I said, that's right, you're an environmental lawyer. How about you go back to your office and we'll call you when there's an oil spill.
Oh, environmental lawyer slam. Well, it's Jeff Clark. Actually, he was an anti-environmental lawyer, so go get him. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you think enough people are watching the January 6 hearings to know that Jeff Clark was the guy that Donald Trump was trying to put into the top of the Department of Justice to help him steal the election?
Well, if they didn't, they do now.
They do now. What do you got for us today?
Well, first, in Japan, officials are urging millions of residents to conserve electricity as an historic and dangerous heat wave strains the electric grid. A persistent heat wave gripping Northeast Asia set a new national record for Japan for the month of June at 104 degrees, and 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle, the town of Norilsk, Russia, hit a record 90 degrees. Globally, multiple June heat waves have set monthly and all-time high temperature records in the U.S., Europe, Asia, and the Russian Arctic, and it's not even July yet, which is typically the hottest month in the Northern Hemisphere. All of this matters because increasingly severe, frequent, and long-lasting heat waves are a clear manifestation of human-caused global warming.
And this is a very cruel summer so far.
Here in the U.S., a new report by the U.S. Forest Service concludes that the agency's mistakes during a controlled burn to reduce the threat of wildfires were responsible for causing New Mexico's ongoing Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon Complex fire.
Oops.
The largest wildfire in the state's history. The report found that the agency used outdated modeling that underestimated climate change intensified drought and heat. Plus, it found chronic understaffing made worse by government shutdowns, and the pandemic created a years-long backlog in forest clearing projects that put pressure on crews to catch up. Forest Service Chief Randy Moore said man-made climate change has narrowed the window for prescribed burns, and it is causing more intense and frequent wildfires, creating, quote, conditions on the ground that we have never encountered. Fires are outpacing our models.
Not good.
A different study underscores how climate change is dangerous, widespread, and costly. It finds that more than 70% of American adults say they have been directly affected by extreme weather events like hurricanes, wildfires, floods, and heat waves over the last 5 years. And for many, it was financially devastating. The new nationwide survey conducted by Harvard University and National Public Radio found many weather disaster victims suffered long-term financial problems, in part because most disaster victims do not receive federal emergency funding.
Well, the important thing is that it doesn't cost the fossil fuel companies anything. They're doing just fine.
Here's NPR reporter Rebecca Hersher.
About a fifth of people who experience floods, they had long-term financial problems. And as far as health goes, about a third of the people who were affected by wildfires said that they had serious problems, mostly because of smoke in the air. People who are already marginalized in our society, they are more likely to suffer long-term financial impacts, long-term health impacts after a weather disaster.
Good reporting from NPR there.
And it's probably not a surprise that the survey found that people who have experienced extreme weather are more concerned about climate change and support climate policies.
Go figure.
But some good news. A federal environmental assessment has determined that hard rock mining in the Minnesota wilderness is an exceptionally bad idea that would risk contaminating the region's water. The U.S. Forest Service assessment found that proposed copper and nickel mining would pose a major risk to the region's famous Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. The draft assessment proposes a 20-year ban on copper mining on federal lands in the watershed, and it comes 6 months after the Biden Interior Department canceled 2 mining leases in the area granted by the Trump administration.
Good for the Biden administration.
Finally, voters in Colombia, in South America, have elected their first leftist president, an economist and former guerrilla fighter named Gustavo Petro, who campaigned on a platform of reorganizing Colombia's economy to combat climate change and end its dependence on fossil fuels. Petro has pledged to phase out new fossil fuel production.
The ironically named Petro.
Indeed.
For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I thought it was interesting that General Flynn's testimony was brought up during the committee hearing today. I think I have a problem with the general pleading the fifth. I think I just do. Now remember, when Trump said that, only criminals and mob bosses plead the fifth. Here he is, a general, someone that the right views in a very high way, pleading the fifth. Some pretty simple stuff. I just got a problem with that. With all of these cowards, again, remember, these are the very best people. The very best people. And we're here to share some thoughts on today's big hearing. I've asked our good friend Fred Wellman to come talk with us. Fred is the co-founder of the Beer Hall Project, beerhallproject.com, the website. If you want to check out the work that they do, you can also follow him on Twitter at FP Wellman, also at Beer Hall Project. Fred, thanks for taking time for us.
It was good to be here, Rick. Good to see you.
So let's start with General Flynn. The fifth. Are you surprised that he pled the fifth?
Oh no, he's a criminal. Look, General Flynn is execrable. He's the worst of us. He's a disgrace to the uniform. He's a disgrace to our service. The fact is, the guy rose to the ranks, riding the coattails of people like Stan McChrystal, and he made 3 stars. And when he reached that pinnacle of his achievement, taking over the nationals at the NSA, the National Security Agency, he failed. He was a terrible leader. He was or DIA. He was a terrible leader. He was more involved in cultural issues of what women could wear to work, and obsessed with Muslim issues instead of doing his job. And he was fired for good reason. And he was a bitter, angry guy, because the fact is that the deal is, when you make 3 stars and you make lieutenant general, you're set for life. You're going to be on the boards, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, GD. You're set for life. And that black president took it away from him. And from then on, Michael Flynn's been on a mission to get revenge and get his money. And that's why today you see a guy who still calls himself General Flynn, which, the funny thing, he's lieutenant general, but he always uses general because, whatever. And now he's been obsessed ever since. And you see him trying to get people to send him money for his stupid T-shirts, for everything he can. You see him selling his soul to Turkey to do illegal things for Turkey and getting a pardon for that. And now you see him on camera after one of the worst days in American history, incapable of actually even assisting in the investigation, because there's a very good chance he's criminally culpable. And he stands there and he watches that camera and says, "I take the fifth," over and over and over. So, it's completely on brand for that man. And I expect no less from him, and I expect no more from him.
Yeah, but, the thing is he's not the only military person. I look at my congressman, Brigadier General Scott Perry, who his name keeps popping up as well in all of this.
Yep.
And, I'll tell you, here's another guy, this one refuses to testify, refuses to honor the request to come in and testify. And look, I think he should, as my representative, he should be compelled to have to testify, because I think at some point when you're the people's representative, you don't get to say, "Oh, I'm not going to testify." You sit your butt in the chair, even if you're going to go the Flynn route and plead the fifth.
Well, that's it. And again, and Perry's even worse. I mean, Perry is currently serving, a general. He's a brigadier general in the National Guard right now. This is a man who has sworn an oath to the Constitution. He was spending his time as a congressman 2 years ago trying to undermine that very oath, and then has lied and covered up ever since. I mean, it is mind-boggling to me that the National Guard still allows him to serve after all this, and that gets to the big issue, right? That gets to the issue we talk about a lot. Where is the military on all these terrible political people, the people acting politically, these people very much acting against the values that we serve, the values that we are supposed to serve. And the silence is deafening at times. It's exhausting to me.
And this is where
Perry's got a lot to hide.
No, this is where I'm fearful of where we're going as a country, because and I'm waiting for you to come after me over this, but I believe that had our military had to decide, which way to go on this, had Trump not relinquished power, had there been a phone call from Congress of going, hey, someone's got to come from the military to either move him out or keep him in power, I think the military keeps him in power.
Yeah, there was fear. There was fear that by bringing in troops that Trump could invoke the Insurrection Act and flip those guys. There was and that tells you where we are, right? After 4 years of Trump in office, for the first time in American history, I think, at least in my lifetime, we had to worry about what side our military would take. This is something I fought about in Iraq. When I was in Iraq, training the Iraqi security forces, working for General Petraeus and General Dempsey, one of our big things was we would always tell the Iraqi service members and the leaders that you have to serve all Iraqis. And when we would go to bases and they would have, for example, the Shia troops would have pictures of their martyrs, and we'd tear these pictures off their trucks. Like, you cannot have Shia martyrs and religious iconography on government vehicles, because Iraqis need to know their military serves them, that it serves all Iraqis and it serves their democracy, not just Shia, not just Sunni, not just Kurd. And we thought that was just so common sense. Now here I am in America. I've got a Brigadier General in the National Guard, Scott Perry, who I question his loyalty to the Constitution. You've got Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, has not been condemned by his peers or his former peers. We have serving officers saying some really disturbing things. And it for the first time, I think, in my living memory, we actually have to question the political loyalties of our military. And that is a very, very scary place. An apolitical military is one of the bedrock foundational issues of our nation. We should never question the duty of our military to the country. And I'm sickened that Trump and his allies and his conspirators have spent years trying to divide us. And that's what you see. That's why you tune into Fox News. You see Tucker Carlson talking about the woke generals versus the troops. They're literally making every effort possible to divide the troops, divide our service members against their own leadership. And every American should be sickened by this, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum. It is inappropriate. It is incredibly dangerous to the safety and security of this nation that our military may be divided along political lines. That hasn't happened since 1861, and we know what happened then.
Yeah, no, and here we are in this moment, and I'm looking at these people who have for years told me they've carried the Constitution in their pocket and they've draped themselves in the flag and how they love their country. And I listened to the testimony of this 26-year-old woman who laid out that every one of these people are cowards, that every one of these people, in the moment that it mattered, did nothing to stop one person from tearing down what I believe, and that I hold sacred, that I believe every American in this country holds sacred, which is that our votes matter, the ballot box matters, our Constitution matters, and that the peaceful transfer of power matters. But one guy was able to tear that apart.
Yep. Well, I mean, he had friends, he had help. I mean, let's not be, he has a malicious influence, but he has a lot of allies and friends who helped him. And he brought in people like Chris Miller at the end there, who apparently was more interested in like touring his old bases he was stationed than actually being the Secretary of Defense. I've been very sickened to seeing the Mark Esper Forgiveness Tour. Mark Esper joined the military, joined the Secretary of the Army, and then Secretary of Defense, knowing exactly who he was going to serve. There was at that point when Mark Esper joined the Pentagon, we knew exactly who Trump was. In the process of becoming the Secretary of the Army, Trump issued the transgender ban via tweet. So if Mark Esper tries to BS anybody, if Mark Esper tries to BS anybody and say that he didn't know this was coming, it's a lie. He knew exactly what he was walking himself into when he did it. And so to try and spin the history and say, well, we held the line. Look, you were fully capable of understanding what was happening. You were fully part of it. You committed to being a part of this administration. And so I have very little forgiveness for people who are now out trying to rewrite history, that there was some sort of a hero who held the line. Look, you fully participated in the line having to be held. Again, it's great the institution's held, but we should all be angry and sickened that the institutions had to. That they had to.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Fred Wellman, co-founder of the Beer Hall Project. Make sure you check out the work that they do over at the beerhallproject.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can check that out. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit because, you look at the damage that administration has done. And, as I said earlier on the program, I think we're at a crossroads. I think we're at a 1932 moment where the next 90 years of our country is on the line if we make the wrong decisions in this next election. And I would argue we're already on the wrong path given what's happened over the last couple of years. And I look at the most recent decision in Roe being just another step down that road. I mean, I go back to Janice back in 2018. You look at this decision. This Supreme Court has been horrible for workers. It's been horrible for consumers. And now it's horrible for women. And it's going to get worse. I'm curious your thoughts on the Roe decision.
Well, I'm sickened. I live in Missouri now. The trigger law went into effect immediately. I predicted it then, and I stand by it, that as we speak, while you and I are having this conversation, there's hospitals, there's doctors questioning their ability to treat women who desperately need health care. Abortion isn't about inconvenient pregnancies. This isn't 1972. It's about in vitro fertilization. It's about difficult pregnancies that go bad. It's about ectopic pregnancies. It's about true healthcare where a woman has cancer and has to get treatment. She can't get pregnant. What we're doing is hurting women's healthcare in a myriad of ways that is unfathomable. And to simplify it to saying, well, it's about inconvenient pregnancies or women who just want to make the choice. It's completely misnaming it and misgoing on. And then we talked about the other day, I think, was about how this affects military readiness. How do I explain to a young military service member, a woman who's in Texas or now Missouri, she cannot get health care that she needs, that she cannot get it in the local economy? The Hyde Act already prevents her from getting it from federal facilities. So she could not get an abortion in a military hospital anyway. No problem. We can go to the health care on the market. Well, guess what? So now she's got to go to her commander and say, well, look, hey, sir, I need leave so I can travel 3 states away to get an abortion. What an offensive abuse of her privacy. What an offensive abuse of why she may be pregnant. And that's before we even start talking about military sexual trauma and the sexual assault crisis we have in the military. Honestly, it's yet, I think I've mentioned it before when we've talked, is, I was a military planner for most of my career. I was an operations officer. My job was to make plans and to constantly be thinking of what the second and third order effects of every decision we made. If the Corps goes this way, what will be the reaction by the enemy? Where will they go? I have to always think about what's the next, second, third, fourth steps. And I just don't believe that many of these folks have even thought even one step beyond, just save the babies. And they realize that in this desperation, supposed to be pro-life, they're going to cost women lives. I saw a great analysis today about how, while all these laws try to cover their butts by saying, well, it doesn't cover, in the danger of the woman's life, the danger of the mother's life, that's actually a defense. In other words, if a doctor gives an abortion to a woman who's in grave danger, hemorrhaging, he could still be prosecuted, but he'll be able to use the defense that the mother's life was in danger. He's still going to get sued. He still may get arrested. He may still have his reputation destroyed. He may still have to go to court to defend himself. So that whole little caveat about, oh, well, abortion's okay in the danger of the mother's life is an absolute crock. What they've done is endangered women's lives, because now, before a doctor can do life-saving medicine, he's going to have to talk to a lawyer. And that's just outrageous. Yeah. It is 2022. This is just outrageous.
Now, do you see the Josh Hawley opinion of red states getting redder and blue states getting bluer as the potential future? Because I'm looking at my daughters and I'm going, if in November Pennsylvania elects a Nazi as governor and we end up as a no-rights state, I fully expect my daughters to leave the state and not be near home and be someplace where they would have some rights and some protections. And that could be a state, somewhere near here or far away. Do you see that kind of split happening?
Well, I think we've always had the danger of people of means being able to do that. But come on, let's be honest. Not everyone can just move states. Not all of us have the luxury and the privilege to say, you know what, I just choose not to live in that state. I do think you'll see You're going to see some alignment in the business community. Why would a business that pretends to be even remotely aware of the females and the women in its ranks want to move their headquarters to a state that could endanger their healthcare? It sounds cute. Josh thinks he's very clever. Oh, this is gonna be great. We'll get rid of those libs. Yeah, you're gonna also get rid of their companies, their money, the brain drain that goes with that, the tech brain. It sounds cute. Which is all Josh Hawley does, right? For a guy who lives in Virginia, by the way, a purple state. He's not actually living in Missouri. So Josh's opinion means next to nothing. I think cockroaches have more self-awareness than Josh Hawley. But in the end, there is a danger there. There is a danger. Look, you get it. It would be very hard for me if one of my daughters is pregnant to have her come visit me in Missouri in case something goes wrong. It'd be very difficult for me to encourage them to go to college in this state. And that is a very dangerous thing, but it is not good news. Josh Hawley can spin it all he wants, but the fleeing of people who are of means and of people who have the ability to make that choice will leave them with a very small tax base and some real challenges of their own. So I just think Josh Hawley continues to prove himself being a despicable human being.
Well, not just him, but a lot on the far right.
Well, they're spiking the ball right now, Rick. Right? I mean, and look, I mean, we now, just before we went on the air, 3 different, generic ballot polls have now come out since Roe was thrown out, and they've all flipped. So for 3 days now of generic ballot flips, it was +3, D +3, D +7, D +7, and another D +7. So many of us have never seen the generic ballot flip that dramatically, that fast. The Republicans have caught that, the dog chasing the mailman, right? They've caught it. And unlike previous decisions, okay, usually when a Supreme Court decision comes down, it's just sort of an esoteric thing, right? Well, it's going to change things, in general, that the EPA rule is coming out. But this one meant that 13 states almost immediately outlawed abortion. That in 13 states, women may very well die as early as today because they can't get the health care they need. In 13 states, women have to question whether or not they can get obstetric care that they need, gynecological care that they need. That's not esoteric. That's real. And the Republicans are so excited. The Christian nationalists are so excited. They're not going to just wait. They're going to go for more. And you've seen it. Glenn Youngkin in Virginia announced immediately that he's going to try and go for a 15-week abortion ban in Virginia. Okay, good luck with that. And so he can't. He has to. His frothing base of Christian nationalists will demand that even Republicans in hard left, liberal, or purple states are going to be forced. They're going to try and avoid abortion issue all they can, talk about gas prices, talk about the economy, but their own base is going to absolutely obliterate them if they don't go all in on the abortion issue. And it's a losing issue. We all know that. That's why the Republicans have avoided abortion for so long. It's easy to say they support it, but then do nothing about it. But now they've caught that thing, and now they actually are going to be forced to do something. And I tell you, anyone who discounts the impact of this decision and what it may hold for the midterms is seriously missing what's going on and needs to talk to an actual woman, because our women friends are pissed, as they should be, and I'm hoping they are. And I hope they stay pissed. That's my job. I'm hoping they stay that way, and I'm hoping come in November they vote that way, because it's something we absolutely need. And then you combine what we saw with the January 6th hearings. There's tons of anger, and I don't understand why some of the mindset out there is Democrats aren't excited to vote. There's a lot of reason to be excited, but yeah, and I think it's shifting. I think those polls are starting to show that people get it. Gen Z is pissed. I can't tell you who I've talked to, but I've talked to candidates' family members who are like, "Nah, I'm done." It's like people are angry. Women, young women. This is the first time in American history that a settled right has been removed from Americans, and they did it to over half of our population. If you don't think for 1 second that's not going to have a price at the ballot box, you're delusional. There you go, Fred. I appreciate the time. Always good stuff. As always. Thanks so much. Our good friend, Fred Wellman. Love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, podcast, you can get that at the website or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Quick break, right back after this.
a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, talking to Fred, always interesting, but, you know, he brought up an interesting point about the military. You know, what are you going to do with all of the women that are in the military? What are you going to do with the spouses of the servicemen? What are you going to do with all of those folks in those states that, because what we've decided is we're going to put those military bases in a lot of southern states. When they went around and they closed a bunch of bases, they were heavily closed in northern states and in Democratic states, kind of chosen that way. And they were allowed to remain open in southern states. And a lot of those now, what are you going to do when you can't recruit women into the military anymore because you're going, hey, I can't go to name the state, or you have to start throwing them out because, well, and then the other part of this that I haven't heard anyone talk about yet, is this going to be a new reason to rape? Will the incels now have their reason because women won't be able to report it because immediately you're going to have to take a pregnancy test. And then you won't be able to do the other things. You won't be able to get telemedicine and get the plan B or one of the other things one of the workarounds. You know, this is bad stuff. There's a lot, as Fred pointed out, they or maybe they have thought this out, second and third tier. And I argue they have. They've gamed this out. I've argued that they want to take us back to the 19th century. I've argued that they want that power and that control, that the original intent. As I always say, they want women back in the kitchen. They want blacks in the fields and gays back in the closets. That's their vision of the future. And they want a theocracy at the top of it, heavily funded by taxpayer dollars, that then they can dole out. This is where we're heading. Mark my words. I'm waiting for that first representative, that first senator, that first political voice to come forward and go, we need social spending money. We need to take care of them, their babies. And we're going to do it with a faith-based initiative. We're going to let the God-fearing Christian and the church people, we're going to let them do it. Wait for it. It's coming. Because it's going to give those charlatans the ability to get their snouts in the trough. And then you're going to see the steamroll. And look, if Republicans do take power, like in my state of Pennsylvania in November, they are going to show Democrats how to run the steamroller because they know how to push their agenda. There will be no Joe Manchins holding things up. There will be no Kirsten Sinemas. There will be none of that. There will be agenda come up, agenda get passed, move forward. That's where we're heading, folks. That is where we are heading. It's scary times ahead, and we better figure out quickly where we're heading. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you know. Get that at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day that the U.S. Congress passed the Walsh-Healy Public Contracts Act. The bill had been proposed by the Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins. The act was part of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal effort to combat the ravages of the Great Depression. The year before, the President and Secretary Perkins had faced a major setback in their New Deal policies. The Supreme Court had declared the National Industrial Recovery Act, part of the recovery plan, unconstitutional. The President and his team went back to the drawing board to develop new strategies. Secretary Perkins told the president, quote, "I've got 2 bills locked in the lower left-hand drawer of my desk against an emergency." One of those bills became Walsh-Healy. The act declared that... I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day that the U.S. Congress passed the Walsh-Healy Public Contracts Act. The bill had been proposed by the Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins. The act was part of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal effort to combat the ravages of the Great Depression. The year before, the President and Secretary Perkins had faced a major setback in their New Deal policies. The Supreme Court had declared the National Industrial Recovery Act, part of the recovery plan, unconstitutional. The President and his team went back to the drawing board to develop new strategies. Secretary Perkins told the president, quote, "I've got 2 bills locked in the lower left-hand drawer of my desk against an emergency." One of those bills became Walsh-Healy. The act declared that any manufacturer with a contract of more than $10,000 with the U.S. government for goods or supplies had to abide by certain rules. They had to pay the prevailing minimum wage. They had to allow their employees to work an 8-hour workday and a 40-hour work week. They could not hire boys under the age of 16 or girls under the age of 18. Companies could not use prison labor, and the companies had to provide a safe and healthy workplace. This New Deal Act stood up under the scrutiny of the courts. Even more importantly, the act was a precursor to the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Fair Labor Standards Act was passed the next year, providing many of these same provisions to the general workforce. The Walsh-Healy Act remains in effect today, protecting workers who are employed by companies that manufacture goods for the U.S. government. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Too many big business CEOs turn out to be grifters, ripping off consumers, workers, and others. But the corporate con artists I consider most vile are those who profiteer on people's health care needs. We've had such infamous high-profile scammers as Medicare fraudster Rick Scott, Big Pharma price gouger Martin Shkreli, and the Sackler family of opioid pushers. Worse, though, we now face an industry-wide epidemic of insurers, hospitals, and others that are pushing higher costs onto patients, then systematically pushing those who can't pay the full inflated tab into debt schemes. With bloated interest charges, payments go on for years, and medical bankruptcies are soaring. The most significant statistic in today's avaricious world of healthcare finance is this: half of U.S. adults don't have the money to cover a $500 medical bill. Thus, as the system keeps jacking up its prices and profits, millions of families are forced by illness or injury into the dark valley of debt, inhabited by ruthless debt collectors employed by the medical establishment. But wait, you say, I have health insurance. Still, ever-increasing prices and out-of-pocket insurance requirements put you into debt too. A recent Kaiser Family Foundation survey found that 6 out of 10 working-class adults with health coverage went into medical debt in the past 5 years. Most perversely, healthcare debt prevents many people from getting health care. 1 in 7 Americans say the corporate system has refused care to them because they have unpaid medical bills, and 2/3 say they've put off care because of the fear of crushing debt. As one expert puts it, the number 1 reason and the number 2 and 3 and 4 reasons that people go into medical debt is that they don't have the money. It's not complicated. This is Jim Hightower saying, to help stop healthcare industry's profiteers, go to ripmedicaldebt.org. The Hightower Radio.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So quite a day indeed. You got this Capitol Police Sergeant Gonell, who has come out and said that he holds Donald Trump personally responsible for the injuries that he sustained defending the Capitol. He said, quote, "Our own president set us up." He says, "I feel betrayed. The president should be doing everything possible to help us, and he didn't do it. He wanted to lead the mob. He wanted to lead the crowd himself. He wanted to be a tyrant." I'm not going tyrant. I think king. I think he wanted to be Grand Poobah. Tyrant. I'll go with tyrant. Look, what the heck? Yeah, he wanted to be all those things. Are we surprised? 2-year-old throwing dishes against the wall, temper tantrums, reaching for the steering wheel. We surprised? Not even a little bit. Absolutely everything I expected, everything I suspected, everything we claimed during those 4 years. So nothing surprising. What is surprising is this young woman, to her absolute credit, stood up and spoke out, and I give her credit for that. And here to give us the D.C. perspective, I've asked our good friend Mike Sozan to come talk with us. Mike is the director of or senior fellow over at the Center for American Progress. He's also focusing on democracy and government reform there. Their website, americanprogress.org. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me back. What a day, like you said.
Yeah, I was waiting in anticipation. Me and my daughter, we were sitting in the car with the phone on as we're driving, watching this, glued almost to it at every opportunity, and bombshell after bombshell. This woman, like I said, to her great credit, someone who I think is a true believer, came and bared her soul.
That's right. And I'm so glad you're starting with that point, Rick, because let's talk about who Cassidy Hutchinson is. She is a true MAGA believer. She's a Trump supporter through and through. She had worked for Ted Cruz. She had worked for Kevin McCarthy and Stephen Scalise, two of the most senior members of House Republican leadership. And she, with working for Donald Trump in the White House, elevated up to being a senior advisor to the chief of staff, Mark Meadows. She never would have gotten there unless she was a true believer. And luckily, she's one of the very few former people in Trump's orbit who stepped forward to tell the truth. I wish there were more. It's ironic that it takes a young woman to do this when much older men should have the strength and fortitude to step forward and tell the truth. She's putting her life on the line. Let's make no mistake. She's probably receiving hundreds, if not more, death threats right now from MAGA extremists for daring to double cross Donald Trump. And he's put out a ton of tweets about her today, calling her all sorts of names and saying he hardly even knew her. But let's also tell your audience that they're probably sophisticated enough to know, but I will say it anyway. To be a senior advisor to the chief of staff in the White House means that Cassidy Hutchinson was a fly on the wall for almost all important events there. She was in the nucleus of the White House, only steps away from the Oval Office. So she is an incredibly credible and powerful witness.
Yeah, and look, the pictures were there. I mean, she's there. There's no doubting. Yeah, that's her. That's him. There isn't much difference. And the only defense I'll make for Donald Trump and him saying I hardly noticed her, I hardly knew he was there, is because she's a young woman, and other than maybe him thinking she's going to get him some coffee or a hamburger, I can see him overlooking her.
Fair point. But she definitely was a key White House staffer. And she revealed so many powerful things today. Going back to what you said, a lot of what she said were things we generally knew about Trump, but the way she was able to vividly describe it because she was in the room was really telling. And also in another showing of how she had respect and seniority in the White House, she had the White House counsel, for example, coming to her and directly trying to get her help to have Trump back down. She had members of Congress directly calling her, either talking about pardons, or Kevin McCarthy talked to her and said, Cassidy, you got to keep the president from coming down here to the Capitol on January 6th. So this was somebody who was very in the know. And again, that's why her testimony is so powerful, to putting Donald Trump in the center of this conspiracy to hold on to his political power at any cost.
Now, here's the thing. This is where I go, we knew all this. I think internally, those of us who have been paying attention all this time, we believed all this. We knew all this was reality. What I wouldn't allow myself to go to. I knew Trump was this kind of a child, the 2-year-old sore loser, throwing temper tantrum. I want my way, me, me, me. I understood that. I get that. That's who he's always been. He's a con man. He's a thug. He wants to be a wannabe mob boss, which it played out in a lot of this testimony. We could talk about that in a minute. What really shocked me is how all of the people around it, literally everybody around it, even her, in the moments when it mattered, didn't do anything. I mean, the entire machinery was, incapacitated by this one person. Nobody really did anything. A couple resignations, but that's about it.
That's a good point. And every time I point to somebody like Cassidy Hutchinson or Mike Pence as a hero, I have to have the caveat in the front of my mind, as you just said. If they were truly heroic, they would have stood up at the time and said something. They would have called the FBI. They would have called law enforcement. They would have alerted the U.S. People in some way. So yes, there is a big caveat, a big asterisk next to the word hero next to them. But even at this stage, I give her great credit for testifying in person in front of this committee when she knows her life is going to be put really on the line, in danger.
No, without question, I absolutely agree. But here's my point. My point is, had the machinery at the moment done the right thing, we wouldn't be in this moment now. There wouldn't have been all those days from the election night all the way through January 6th where you allowed Donald Trump to go out and lie repeatedly, and then to have the entire machinery, the Jim Jordans, the Scott Perrys, go down the list, all of them going out and repeating the big lie, repeating what they all knew was complete and total BS. To get to this goal that we now know after the fact, of course, was all written out. We got memos on what the big game plan was off of this big lie, which again was to cause this chaos, to get Mike Pence not to certify this election, so that the House of Representatives, so Jim Jordan, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Trader Greene, the rest of them could steal this election for Trump. That's what this was about.
You're right. It's a deep, well-laid conspiracy, and in many ways, the system failed us by not revealing it much sooner. Thank goodness, democracy held by just a thread, but it held. But it's still, you know what? We're still on life support, I'd say.
Yeah, because look, MAGA crowd still believes what Trump is telling them. Still believe all this is a hoax. It's all Democratic kabuki theater. It's all made up. These are all the people around him, around Trump's circle, saying this is what they did. And, well, the world still doesn't believe them.
And many of them, Rick, as you know well, are running for office in many states around the country, building their campaigns based on the big lie. And also, I think, going back to today's gripping testimony and the hearing that we had today, Liz Cheney presented evidence to the world showing that the conspiracy is still well and alive in the respect that there is witness intimidation still ongoing. And people, whether it's Trump or people right around him, somewhere within the team, are still trying to influence witnesses from being able to testify about the truth. So that's why, you know what, Americans want accountability here. They want to make sure that no matter which party tries to do this in the future, they don't want it to happen. Yeah. They want to know that their votes are going to count and that elections are going to be free and fair. And so that's why this is an ongoing thing that all Americans should care about.
Yeah, you're right there. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're Mike Suzan. He's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. He focuses on democracy and government reform there. Check out their work there at the website. Now, I brought up a moment ago that Trump wanted to be the Mafia Don. This is exactly what we're talking about. This kind of, hey, you got a mighty nice life right there. Shame if something were to happen to it. If you're loyal and you do the right thing, you're going to be okay in our world, but you never know. That just seemed to me to be one of those ugly, one of those bad Hollywood movie scenes from the 1980s that I truly believe Trump sees himself as, as Don Trump. He's Vito Corleone, man. He thinks he's at the top of the game.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And let's remember, throughout his career, he surrounded himself with a lot of those sorts of people. He learned some of those lessons from his father. And, there were so many times during today's hearing that I thought the same thing that you did, in terms of he just loves to be a mob boss, in effect. He sees himself as leading these sorts of efforts to stay in power at all costs. And I'll just talk about one other stunning example where he was told that his supporters who were on the National Mall for the rally, many of them were carrying weapons of all types. Even flagpoles they had turned into spears, let alone guns and knives and brass knuckles and body armor, etc. He knew that they were there. Many of them were not able to come through the metal detectors into the area where he was giving his speech because they had the weapons on them. And he was warned repeatedly, your supporters are going to storm the Capitol. They're going towards the Capitol with these weapons. And like a mob boss, he said, that's okay. Let them do it. He made no attempt to call them back. In fact, he wanted to go join them because he said, those are my peeps. Those are my people. They're not going to hurt me. Let me go down there with them. I mean, that's pretty stunning. And he was, and then when he was told that there were chants of hang Mike Pence, his vice president, he basically said he didn't disagree with that.
Yeah, he basically said, well, make sure you got enough rope for him. I'm sure that probably came out as well. But this is one of those moments where you go, and look, my 13-year-old daughter and I were in the car listening to that, and she goes, did they just say that the president said hang the vice president? Right. And I said, yeah. And I said, you're going to need to remember that. Because when you talk to your grandchildren about this moment in history, because this will be something that future generations are going to look back at. This era, this moment that we're living in is a deciding moment. Which direction does our country go? Do we go, back towards the 19th century, or do we continue on in a forward path and not destroy the 20th century and move forward? This is where we're heading. And your grandchildren are going to suffer the consequences of whatever happens here.
Yep. That's right. And your daughter's also, we're all living through it, but your daughter is also seeing how the U.S. Supreme Court is taking away rights of women for the first time in 50 years with their decision on the abortion case. And they're dismantling the separation between church and state. And some people say, well, how is that related to the insurrection? Well, guess what? All of this is about extreme conservatives grabbing onto power and trying to hold on to power at any costs and ramming their agenda through, even though the majority of the country disagrees with it. And so we're seeing that whether it's in Congress, whether we're seeing it with President Trump, what he did, and now we're seeing it with the Supreme Court. And that's one of the reasons why our democracy is in a pretty precarious position right now.
No, this is what we were talking about. This could have been the death of constitutionally limited Democratic Republican representation. This could have been the end of it. And it still could be, because we're not out of the woods. We've got a really extreme conservative, corporate, theocratic Supreme Court that could make really horrible decisions in the coming years to affect your life, your children's lives, and your grandchildren's lives. This is this important kind of a moment, which is why I think this hearing is so important, to understand exactly what happened, not just on January 6th, but what happened in the years before, and the moneyed interests who support all of this. And this is where I'm still hoping this committee goes, and this is where I kind of want to wrap this up, is for future hearings. This one, look, each one of them have been more explosive and more compelling than the last. I want to get to the point to where we start talking about who funded this, who benefited from this outside of Trump world. I want to know those people who dug into their pockets and funded all of this, because we need to expose them.
I agree, and I think the committee is going to get there. I hope they do. You're right. There was a vast funding effort that went into all of this. A lot of it through multimillionaires, a lot of it through corporate money. A lot of this money, as we know, is what's called secret dark money, where it's not even disclosed. We don't even know who's pulling the levers. We only have a small insight into it. But I hope the committee starts to unravel that, and that's something that we absolutely have to pay attention to going forward.
Yeah. So last question. I know I wanted to wrap it up here, but last question. You being a DC person, this has got to be rocking DC when you're looking at. Look, I look at most DC operatives as soulless. Most of them are in it's just a game, but at least some of them have some basic dignity and hey, there are parameters. What we're seeing coming out of the Republicans right now is they're completely soulless. There are no guardrails. There's nothing there. What's this doing in DC? What do you feel is going on?
This is like an earthquake in DC. Now, many of the MAGA extremist Republicans, nothing's going to change their mind. They're going to dig in more. But I've had conversations with a few reasonable Republicans or even former Republicans who are now independents who say, you know what? I thought that this whole insurrection thing was overblown. I thought it was more of just a riot that spontaneously got out of control. But hearing by hearing, the committee is convincing me that this was a well-laid plan. There's something bigger here, and Donald Trump can never come near the presidency again. And they might not say that they want to see him prosecuted, but we're already seeing in the poll numbers that Americans are saying, hold anyone accountable, including a former president. No one should be above the law here. And no matter which party tries to do this, in the future, we can never let it happen again. And I think this message is growing inside of DC, and I think it hopefully growing even outside of DC.
Yeah, well, here again, none of these people should ever be near the halls of power again. None of them, not one of them. Right. Given the fact that they were all complicit in this, they were all, in the moment when it mattered, they were all silent. Granted, look, some of them have come forward and bravely so. I give Miss Hutchinson credit. But, sorry, when it mattered, you were nowhere to be found. At least that's my view. But, Mike, I appreciate the time. Always great stuff.
Thank you, Rick. Talk to you soon.
Good stuff, as always, our good friend Mike Suzanne. Make sure you check out the work that they do over at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So, look, this is one of those hearings I'm going to go back and watch again because there was a lot. There was so much there. And to be honest, I thought the end, I was going something big, something really big, a call for an indictment, something, a finger being pointed at Rudy. I don't know because, look, at the end when Liz Cheney starts going into, there are people making phone calls and reaching out to witnesses and giving them the, you've been loyal. You'd hate to lose it'd be a shame if something bad were to happen. You got a real nice career there. You got a real nice family there. Shame if something were to happen to that. Which is why you should probably, do the right thing. Do the right thing. Like I said, it's like one of those bad 80s, mafia movies. And immediately my mind goes into, well, this is Giuliani's fingerprints. This is Rudy. So come on, call Rudy out. Say, Rudy was the one behind this. Point the finger at him. Say, hey, Merrick Garland. Start there. Start by going after those lawyers, every person who was standing at the Four Seasons landscaping press conference, every one of those, start there. Let's indict them first. And as soon as those indictments start coming, Because here's the weird thing, and this is what I do expect. No one's been indicted yet. Not really. None of the key players. When Rudy gets indicted, and I'm hoping he will very soon, the question then becomes, does he turn into the rat that I think he is? Does he start singing? Because look, Rudy ain't got many days left. Rudy doesn't want to spend those in jail. Rudy gonna sing. Rudy's gonna sing. Because Rudy knows how the game's played. Because Rudy used to be the guy playing the game. Understand, and this is where it's so sad to look at what Giuliani has become. He was the great mob fighter. He took on the New York mafia bosses when he was a prosecutor there. He was America's freaking mayor. And how far he has fallen, taking money from the Mujahideen Khalq, a terrorist organization. And then being involved in this. Which, look, I'm hoping people have paid attention to these hearings because they are well worth paying attention to. Because here's the thing. And I know I'm going to get into trouble. I know I'm going to get into trouble over this. I know my Democratic friends are going to lose their minds. I know they're going to be unhappy with me. I think they're going to. So you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, but I will defend this. I'm going to defend it. I think Liz Cheney's behind putting on this whole entire presentation. I think that the Republicans do messaging. They do presentation. They do this kind of stuff so much more effective, so much better than Democrats do. They boil things down to the lowest common denominator. They understand how to reach people in their arenas. And these hearings have done that. These hearings have been very focused, laser focused. It's easy to get lost in minutia and to over prosecute and to look at all this stuff. Because look, we're only seeing a little bit of what's out there. There's a lot more. It's worse. But they're presenting you with this is what it is. And I believe this is Liz Cheney's fingerprints all over this. I believe the fact that you only have, one voice, maybe two voices, hammering it. Not everyone gets their 5 minutes of questioning. There isn't grandstanding. They are very focused. They are prosecuting this case in a very methodical way. And they're doing it in a way that is digestible, that is compelling, and that will hold attention. And Democrats don't do that well. They don't do it at all. So this is where I'm going to say this is all Liz Cheney. And this is where you go Republicans. This is the messaging stuff that you're used to. This stuff's focused at you. These are your people putting a display on for you of people that you would have followed, that you have walked lockstep behind for decades. These were, quote unquote, the very best people. These were the Republican intelligentsia. These were the cream of the crop. These were the true believers. I mean, this Cassie Hutchins, this woman, true believer. And you could see it in the way that she was presenting herself. She's a broken true believer. Now, I do feel for her because you do know she is going to get the death threats. She's going to forever be the traitor to the movement. There's some diminished capacity mental moron out there thinking of ways to harm her. But she stood up in a moment that we needed. And I think today was really important. And if you didn't see it, it is available out there. You have got to pay attention to this one. And I would suggest looking at all of them a couple times because these hearings are that important. The information in this, that important in my view. And look, there's just